Hi, my name is Leskew of the Eagle Institute, and this is Midlife Crisis, the 6 steps to kicking your midlife crisis to the curb quickly. Free class. We're going to cover as much as we possible in our short time that we have together. And at the end, I'm going to let you know how to get additional resources because honestly, this isn't a one and done thing. If you want to get it over in one day, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's not going to happen. My goal is to keep this webinar to about 30 minutes. So let's get started. If you have questions, put them into the chat publicly or privately, and I'll do my best at the end to answer them if time permits. So, why is a midlife crisis so misunderstood? Well, let's start off with the cliches. Get divorced, buy a new sports car, get a girlfriend half your age. Oh, yeah, this only happens to straight men in their 40s. Total cliche. Well, let's debunk some of those. First of all, a lot of people do get divorced or change their relationship status. And a lot of people do buy things such as sports cars or motorcycles, or maybe they have more budget and airplane. So another thing is that we find a romantic partner that's half our age or that's significantly different than the one person that we have been with in a long-term relationship. A lot of those things really do happen, but it does happen to everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, this happens. So we do have these stereotypes because they are things that happen, but there's a lot of other things that happen that can really signify or be a signal that you are in a midlife crisis, or maybe someone you know or care about or have to work with is in a midlife crisis. And some of those other ones aren't as well known, so I will explain them to you. Again, my name is Kira, and the reason why I'm doing this is, first of all, I did go through a midlife crisis, and it was really challenging. And I didn't find the level of effective resources available to me to help me to do this properly and to get the most out of it. Luckily, I had been meditating and doing other types of what I would call inner healing work for a very long period of time. So I did have access to a number of techniques that really worked extremely effectively. And there were a lot of other ones that I tried that, some of them were for people that were actually pretty well meaning, but they just were inappropriate or ineffective for this particular issue. And that's not to say that some of them don't work for other issues as well. People have lots of other signs of midlife crisis. So if you have one that I haven't mentioned or that I don't mention in the next little list of sort of the lesser known ones, just put it in the comments below. But I just ask you to please be polite. This is a really challenging time for people. And although it's in a lot of jokes, in the butt of jokes, people are going through a hard time and they're sensitive. So please be kind in your comments. So first off, developing who you are in the world is a huge part. In fact, it's a crucial part of human, and it isn't wrong. People that go through a midlife crisis have completed a part of their development successfully and they're ready for the next step. People that don't have a strong midlife crisis may not have a strong enough sense of self and they're still developing that. And there's a large group of other people that are just in denial. Our society in the West still has some really deep seated fears about really looking deeply into ourselves. Although I've noticed a significant shift in this over the past year or two, and we're going to address that. But one thing I can say is that I have never heard of anybody that regretted doing deep inner work, whether it was with regard to midlife crisis or another issue, even if it was really challenging. And I've yet to hear an example of somebody that didn't feel happier, more balanced, and more satisfied once they went through all the stages earnestly, including me. So, what is happening in a midlife crisis and what's its real purpose? Well, the real purpose is to be aware of and to turn your weaknesses into strengths. This is about mastery if you really go the whole way. Most of the time, these are personal things of the way we interact in the world or the way you interact in the world, and things that you very often learn that you were young and you may not even realize that you do. So, how can you tell this is happening to you and how can you tell? Well, here are the 6 stages and some common characteristics. First of all, it happens to people that are very accomplished. They have a strong sense of self identity. They're an expert at navigating the world that they've created for themselves. So you are an expert in some way. This could be career, it could be volunteer work, it could be family orientation, it can be sports or other talents. And these people usually have a strong community of like minded people. You find yourself vaguely dissatisfied in the initial stages, and accomplishments don't feel good. Maybe you're bored, maybe you feel like something's missing, or maybe it's really a lot deeper than that. You may actually find yourself having done something that you think is going to bring you a lot of happiness, and you're really unhappy and you can't figure out why. Another thing that's really common at this stage is you recognize a pattern that you don't like in your life, and honestly, you'd just rather not know about it. One time I had a person say to me outright, I should probably deal with this issue, but I can avoid it for 7 years if I start a not for profit company and get my foundation going. That's kind of typical of this stage of a midlife crisis. But then it progresses and people or you try to change things in your external world. Maybe it's a new career challenge. Maybe you take on a project or a massive goal, maybe a personal goal, and I mean massive, like doing an Ironman when maybe you're really not all that fit to begin with. And you're with it and you achieve it. And there's still not that level of satisfaction that you were looking for much past race day. So you go back to feeling dissatisfied again. And honestly, another goal just isn't going to fix it. Other people take a different track. They kind of act out. They do drugs, they break up relationships, they start spending money, they try to buy happiness. And honestly, this can just go on for years and it just doesn't work. I actually did some of those things in the early stages of my midlife crisis because I didn't understand what was going on. And I thought that by picking a problem and solving it, that would make me happier, and it didn't. Another thing that doesn't work is being positive, trying to solve individual issues. Now, I always recommend doing your best to feel positive, but most of the techniques around being positive are for more accomplishment, and that's working on the wrong thing in a midlife crisis. That's one of the signature characteristics that you're dealing with a midlife crisis and not some other issue. You can't solve issues in your life or accomplish your way to happiness or to get through a midlife crisis. But there is a way that works. It's a different way, and I'm going to share that with you. But first, it helps to have some context about what a midlife crisis is all about fundamentally. So we've kind of covered a little bit of the first stages, so let's make it clear. The first 2 stages are first dissatisfaction, and you probably can't put your finger on a particular cause for it. And the second stage is you try external things to make you happy. And by external things, I mean changing things outside in your life. If I change the circumstances, if I change the people, if I change the kind of work I do, or if I take on a project, that's going to make me happy. And once you start to recognize that, you know what, this just really isn't working, hopefully you're starting to start stage 3, which you start to question things. You start to question everything. And if you get yourself to that point, or maybe you're there now, you're on the right track. This is where a lot of people get confused and other people really misunderstand them. So, unless somebody else is successfully gone through it or is honestly doing the work, just don't expect other people to understand. And this is where many well meaning people give advice that just doesn't work. For the truth is our society's really not that good at doing deep inner work, as although I said it is starting to change. And many people are either afraid of it or they're really not aware of the power of it. So the only way to get past the first two stages is to start doing some deep inner work, some self-awareness, some healing, and to work on your weaknesses until they are your strengths or until the issues are gone. So this is the main part of what stage 3 is all about. You start to question everything and you start to question the things that you once took for granted. You ask yourself questions that maybe you haven't thought of before. You look at yourself in new ways and you start to see your weaknesses. Maybe things you didn't even know you had, or maybe things that you thought were a good thing or a strength or something to be valued, and you start to see it in a different light. You may also question your relationships, and in particular, how you act in them, or how you allow other people to treat you, how you relate to the world. And some of the most important questions that you get to at this stage is, what is your value outside of your identity and outside of your accomplishments? And that's not to say that your accomplishments don't have value, but or that they aren't something that you should have done or that you should continue to do. But it's just the way we relate to those things that we start to question. And a lot of people get stuck at this stage because it can be very overwhelming. This is where people tend to run off and find distractions because they just don't know how to deal with this information, and they don't know how to handle healing and transforming what they've learned quickly. So this is when a lot of the cliches start to happen. The divorce. It's my spouse, it's not me. If I buy a new car, I'm proving my worth to the world. Plus, it takes up time and is entertaining. Maybe if I do drugs or start to decide to run a marathon, or all these other various ways that we can have for distractions at this stage. And there's a lot more that I haven't mentioned here. So if you think of some, mention them in the comments below. There are two main blocks that you can have at this point. The first is fear of what you see. And the second is lack of knowledge and skills to transform and heal the weakness or the blind spots quickly. So if you want to learn how to do that, we do help people through that in a short amount of time. It can take a few months rather than years, or honestly, some people that just never get it done at all. But let's go back. We do have a free evaluation for you to gauge where you're at this process. So your next best step in figuring out what that is to get through to the end of stage 6 quickly. And this is a process, which I am going to go through with you. So stay tuned for that. But most people never get to stage 6 and stay fundamentally unhappy as a result. When you do get through stage 6, you have a sense of authenticity and a sense of peace and a sense of knowing who you are that brings you a level of peace and happiness that honestly most people have never experienced before, including me. So if you do want to get an evaluation done, you can register on the website, theeagleinstitute.com, at the top of the page. It takes about 20 minutes to gauge where you personally are in your midlife crisis and to outline what you need to do next. So getting back to stage 3. At this stage, many people think that they are going crazy. They have it all. They have a successful business or a career or a job that they love. Most of the times they have financial success, probably some awards, and you may have other things as well, like being physically fit, good at some hobbies, maybe what you thought was a really happy romantic relationship or happy family life. But underneath it, they feel unhappy and they try a lot of things. And honestly, I tried a lot of the things that people typically try. I tried new fitness goals. I tried new business goals. I tried traveling and going on trips. I tried learning new things and taking up new hobbies. But the truth is that I had nothing in common with most of the people I spent my time with, especially my marriage and my business partner. And that's similar to many people that are in this position and why so many divorces happen at this time. Some for the right reasons and some for the wrong reasons. The right reason is you're growing or there is abuse. Any other reason for leaving will ultimately not work. You're just going to recreate a very similar relationship with somebody else with fundamentally the same issues. And I saw this happening in myself. Even though I wasn't really, in a romantic relationship, I saw it in business relationships. I saw it in friends that came into my life. I saw it in people in my family. And some of the people that were men that were available for me to date, I started, I recognize this. And I used that knowledge to determine where I still had personal healing work left to do. And that's why I curated so many different techniques and why I help other people with this. I understand the high stakes that some people may feel that they have in doing this work. The biggest person I had to deal with was my ex husband, who is also my business partner. And I mean, there was a lot on the line. And ultimately, though, you have to ask yourself, are you worth it? If you are worth it, it's time to do some deep inner work. In my own case, I had some pretty dramatic events before I woke up enough to start to heal and do the real work. I caught my business partner lying to me a few times about some pretty major things. And in the first stages, I went into my old patterns and habits. I said, oh, I must have caused this. Well, I kind of did because I put him in my life. But I just let him off the hook and didn't address the situation. And it became more and more clear to me that I was lying to myself. And I had to choose, do I want to wake up and deal with this and continue to grow? Or do I want to stay where I perceive it to be financially comfy and ignore it? The truth was, it wasn't comfortable. I had material things, but I was really unhappy and I was really lonely. And I felt a lot of other really negative emotions around what it meant that I was believing people that were telling me things that I just wanted to hear but weren't necessarily true. Luckily, by that time, I had enough experience with meditation and inner healing processes that I was able to persevere and handle the inner questioning. And that's the part that we really help people through. How do you use techniques to know yourself, to discover your truth that is at the core of a midlife crisis and that you probably haven't been paying attention to, or you didn't know how to transform it to something better? If you do the techniques, it does get better. Whatever you need to face within yourself gets better, and the people and the circumstances of your life change for the better. And we've worked with a lot of people on this that have had an intellectual understanding of what's going on with them. Some of them had, almost 10 years where they could articulate clearly the patterns that were going on in their life. In my own case, I had a history of men in my family that were manipulative, and I knew that, but I didn't want to stand up to it, including my father and my husband. And there are a lot of others as well. Actually, I was better at standing up to people that weren't in my family than I was at the ones that were. But knowing that people are manipulating you and not tolerating it are two different things. And this is where the inner work comes in. If you transform and heal the parts of you that falls for these things or that knows but doesn't want to rock the boat and say something, then saying and you heal those parts, then saying whatever you need to say becomes relatively easy. And making decisions for your own self interest is obvious. Whatever the issue is, maybe it's a need for love or recognition, or, like I said, believing things that you want to be true, but that aren't true. And there's many other issues. Saying no, whatever the issue is, becomes really easy. And then it goes away altogether. Those kinds of people, I should just refine that a little bit. Those kinds of people aren't in your life front and center. You may have see it, it may occur not in in the periphery of your life, but it isn't front and center anymore. And I have watched people do these techniques and see things that they don't want to see and start to make significant changes within 3 months. Stuff that they've been putting up with sometimes for 40 plus years. 3 months of techniques done with authenticity and a willingness, they're on a completely different trajectory. One person I trained was a workaholic and had tremendous guilt about working less. So much so that he was depressed. He put in so much time into work and it wasn't going well because he was exhausted. He didn't have time or energy for any other area of his life, and he felt guilty because nobody could do what he expected himself to do. His greatest growth was in developing his personal life and his relationships, but he had a family belief that his value was his work and nothing more. Somehow, if he worked a lot, these other things would magically happen, but he didn't have time or energy for them. His midlife crisis was in learning to take time to look after himself and that wasn't a thing to be guilty about. Within 3 months of working together, he started to get over this. He had reestablished friendships, put healthy and realistic limits on his work time, was clear about his focus at work, and he started expanding his social circle. He started dating. And prior to these techniques, he couldn't have imagined that he could have done those things or that he even needed to do them to be happy. He did have a sense that these other things were necessary, but he just couldn't see clearly the path how to get there. So, how do we do it? How do we get people there? Well, there's a few aspects. And one of the main ones is inner child healing, which is an aspect of certain styles of meditation. And honestly, it's the only path that works for lasting change. Intellectual understanding, even if you have it, most of the time does not solve these problems. As I said, most of the people I've worked with have done intellectual work, sometimes for up to 10 years, and they're still in the same situations. But by doing specific meditations and inner child healing work, many make significant progress in as little as a few weeks, and for sure within 3 months, towards their satisfaction, their happiness, and learning what they need to for their midlife crisis and taking action towards what they need to do. So, we've been talking about there are 6 stages for a midlife crisis. So, now that we've put it in context, let's take a look at what they are. The first stage is a dissatisfaction that you can't define. You are unhappy and you're not sure why that is. The second is you try taking on new projects or solving specific specific issues um, externally in your life, and it doesn't work. So these are things like, we said if you start, oh, maybe if I change my job, maybe if I change my relationship, get a different partner, lose weight, start a new hobby, some kind of accomplishment. So it's always something outside. Then you do enough of those things and you're like, wow, this still isn't working. And then you start to question, well, why isn't this working? And well, what really is going on? And you start to do some deep soul searching, some deep self reflective time. And maybe that's for the first time. And when you start to really start doing that and you've done enough of it, you get to stage 4. And stage 4 is you don't like what you see, or you have to deal with one or more major issues in your life where you have had blind spots in the past. Some of them you may have known about. I knew about mine, but I just wasn't taking it in at the level I needed to and doing something about it. I was still looking at the symptoms and not the cause. And at this stage, you recognize how you have created the situation for these things. And once you do that, you're ready for stage 5. Stage 5 is to do the deep inner work to transform the part of you that created that situation or maybe multiple situations. And that's the crux of when you are transforming and moving through the midlife crisis. And honestly, not a lot of people get to that stage. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping people with this, because it doesn't have to be as hard as what it looks like. Stage 6 is you transform beyond what you even thought was possible. Most people have new possibilities open to them in one or more areas of their life that they just couldn't have imagined before. They may have wished for it, but they didn't have a clear path to getting there, and now they do. You feel a deep sense of authenticity and a deep sense of satisfaction, and you have choices available to you on a broader scope and on a higher plane and range than you did before, and maybe you even didn't know was possible. So, if this is something that speaks to you and you want to learn more about how to make personal progress quickly, I recommend that you build. I recommend that you book a personal "Is This a Midlife Crisis" assessment with me. Again, that's on the website at the very top, theeagleinstitute.com. So I'll put the link below so you can find it easily. So, what are some of the main questions that people have on this? So, one of the ones I get is often about, my partner did this or my partner did that. How do I support my partner that's going through a midlife crisis? The truth is, you need to work on you. And you can love them through it. You can wish the best for them, but you need to let them do it themselves. And you need to focus on you and what is this bringing up in you and work on the aspects of you. Another question that I get a lot is what is the right reason to get a divorce? Well, first of all, always if there's any kind of abuse or bad behavior involved that you need to get away from, that's, you know, a red flag for sure. The other is if you've really done the deep inner work, then you know that you just have nothing in common with this person anymore and there's no further growth available. And that feels very different. You may feel sadness that things are coming to an end. You may even feel a little bit of anger and stuff, but the decision and the way you can handle the working through the process is not generally very painful. It's more about any pain you experience is about the pain of the loss, not about unresolved issues from that relationship that you haven't dealt with yet. And that's the significant difference. So I work mostly on a referral basis. So if you know anybody that's struggling with them, please let them know about this work. There's some really good resources on our website and on our Facebook group, Thrive Through Midlife Crisis. I look forward to working with you and helping you in the future.